Hey everybody, welcome to the Realistic Prepper. This is show number 13. My name's Jack McLean, my co-host David Banther.
Hello.
How's it going, David?
Though it's going well, we got spring break this week for my daughter, so headed over to the heat box that is Disney World on Thursday. So,
Awesome. Awesome.
okay, so
Well, on today's show, we're going to be talking a little bit about comms or communications. And truth be told, this is more David's area of expertise than mine. I'm well aware of the need for good communications, but he's a lot more prepared than I am in this particular aspect. He's a lot more prepared. He's a lot further ahead than I am. So I'm going to kind of give him the floor for the majority of the show here, and I'm going to contribute as much as I know, and we'll go from there. But let's start with a little bit about just the theory behind what we're talking about. You know, the why do you need communications? Why are communications necessary? Dave, your thoughts?
yes, and when we think comms, when you're developing a comms plan, immediately you don't have to go say, well, I need this certain radio or I need this certain toy. More so, just any situation you're in, and not even in a non-emergency, you want to have a communication plan that goes with your family, that goes with if you're out in a car ride or you're traveling long distance and you're in two or three different vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
or like this weekend, say my daughters were old enough at Disney where they'd go off on their own for a few hours. You need to have everything from that kind of a scenario to a grid down scenario. Have a communication plan with your family, friends, coworkers, whoever you have to communicate with.
Now,
And
now you're talking about in a grid down scenario versus a
well, in
grid
a grid up,
versus
I think starting with the
right.
grid up, I'm
Let,
saying
let,
like
let,
how
let's explain to people who might not know what we're talking about
that's true.
when
It's
we
true.
refer
Yeah.
to a grid up situation versus a grid down situation. What we're talking about in those, and I know we've mentioned this in several other podcasts, and we didn't really explain what we meant. But in a grid down scenario is assuming that the lines of communication are either going to be stressed or they're going to be completely cut off. So in other words, your calls might not be able to go through. You may be able to send a text, but you can't make a phone call. Phone lines, power lines might be down. That's what we refer to when we're talking about a grid down scenario. That's kind of what we're talking about.
And there's different levels of grid down.
Definitely.
Some will talk about there's partial grid down, there's local grid down, and then there's shit hits the fan grid down. So
Exactly.
so yeah, we always have to define the lingo we're using here. But yeah, in any situation you're in, you want to have a comms plan. So and I think if we kind of started off here, we're thinking okay, um, as just a family. What should our communication plan be? Well, most people text message,
Right.
even when things are perfectly fine. So I think, and the ease and comfort of text messaging, and you can even use encrypted codes in text messaging if you needed to communicate in a more cryptic way. Is I would say have a communication plan with your group or family using text messaging. Because if you're in a partial grid down, meaning I like to use the example of the Boston Marathon, where they actually shut down cell communication
Mm-hmm.
when that happened, and people were jamming it up as well. People could sometimes still send out, a normal text message. So you and your family or group should have a plan that if something happens, the first communication method should be using text, and develop a plan of maybe even if you wanted to get advanced, have a chain of who texts whom or how you do it. So just an overall in any situation you're in, you want to have just a plan of how you're going to communicate and what method that you're going to use. But Jack, why don't we talk a little bit about how you do your church security and how you'll develop that with
Well,
communication?
two things here. One, as far as when the grid is up, that's going to be the best possible scenario right there.
Mm-hmm.
When the grid is up, best possible scenario. Still need communications. Um, as far as your cell phones go, the preferred method, is always your phone call. At least that's my preferred method. You do have text messaging. If you want to go beyond that, there are other applications out there for the iPhone. You're talking about FaceTime for you have Skype. You have for that matter, Twitter, Facebook. There's all kinds of methods and apps that you can get on your phone that will allow you to communicate, not just text message or calls. So if it's a grid up situation and you do have access to a smartphone, you have all kinds of communication options. Um, Now that'll bring me over to well, two things I want to go over. One is uh, as David was referring to, I'm the head of church security at my local church, and I have expressed a need to the pastor for us to get better communications, and I gave a demonstration of this a few weeks ago, and I basically had him call me and see how long it took for the call to go through versus me to respond to it. And it was around 30 seconds, which you might say is pretty good, but you're looking at 30 seconds for the communication to go through, and then 30 seconds for, and at least 30 seconds to
Mhm.
45 seconds for me to be able to respond. If I'm anywhere in that building to any other far point of that building, it's going to take me 30, 45 seconds maybe, depending on how athletic I am and how I feel that day is going to take me. So now you're looking at over a minute of response time, and I just told him, people can do a lot of damage inside of a minute.
Yeah.
And that is not really the kind of communication we need. We need instant communication. When I hit a button, the other person hears me, and we got that 30-second response time. So very very important. And I really learned valuable lessons about this when I was a correctional officer, having seen some other officers get attacked. Communication, definite need for communications. They would leave their radios, hanging on the door
Mhm.
when they would go into, and you never want to do that. You got to have communications. You got to have a way of communicating with the outside, um, and I think that'll bring us, as far as situations go. That's a more extreme example, but I'll give you a basic example. We have a lot of tornadoes here in Tennessee, and now my family, for the majority, only lives about 10 miles away from me, and which is great most of the time. The problem is 10 miles is a long way when you have no means of communication. If you don't already have a plan and a way to communicate that plan to your family, it can make for a really stressful situation. Especially you have a tornado come through and you have no way of communicating with them, no way of knowing if they're okay. You don't have a solution where they can make it to your home or you make it to their home. So definitely communications are an absolute must. And we also, as with most things regarding prepping, we believe in redundant capabilities. So you should never limit yourself to, do I have my cell phone on me and does it work? So,
Well, Jack, let's also point out you ended well there with the cell phone. Like you pointed out before, keeping your cell phone charged, and on keeping it charged, that means
yep.
in your home and in your car. Please have a car charger. If you do not have a car charger and you watch our podcast, please pause the podcast, go to Amazon and buy yourself a car charger. That's
Go to Walmart. They're like $4 at Walmart,
something.
really.
That's preparedness 101. That's preparedness a
And
grandmother
and,
should have.
and, and
Okay.
don't just get one, get two,
Mm-hmm.
because the one you have with you is always going to break. Just remember
Exactly.
that. So always get two.
You want to have a so when we're still thinking in this grid up mentality,
Hmm.
or even in a partial grid down, you want to have a cell phone that is fully charged. So have a car charger and then have a backup battery source.
Exactly.
Jack's shown before. He has a little cylinder one. I have a spec one that's like a little brick. Basically, it's an external battery, and it will charge your phone.
We,
Those are
we're,
even
we're, we're
good.
not we're not sponsored. I need to reiterate, we're not sponsored by
No,
any of these companies.
I'd love to be, but no, we're not. We're not
Right. So
sponsored.
if we name off a brand, it's because it's either a brand that David has used or
Mhm.
I use and that we trust, not because we're being paid to say this.
Exactly.
The brand that I trust is called Anchor, Anker, and
Mm-hmm.
they make some really high quality and cheap. I mean, as far as the quality you get, it's very low price for the quality you get. Get something. If you get a battery backup charger for your phone, make sure you get something that's going to charge that phone at least a couple of times. You don't want to have a one-shot deal. And for basically 20 to 25 bucks, you can get something that'll give you two full charges on your typical cell phone.
And we'll get a little bit of live interaction here, Jack, because this is on the subject. My cousin just sent me a text message. I saw it come through on my computer screen here.
Mm-hmm.
If I had an extra cell phone charger, as we're discussing this, and I'm always, and she's going to listen to this, and she's going to get on me, but I'm always hounding her. I say, Donna, you have to keep more than the one you have in your house. You got to have one
Exactly.
for your car, at least one for your car, at least two for your home. That way, one breaks, keep one in your purse. So basically, you in a grid up scenario or partial grid down, you want to have a fully charged cell phone or a cell phone that can be fully charged. Don't be one of those people. When I was flying home yesterday, I saw it in the airport. They don't have a charger. They're asking for someone, hey, can I use your charger? Scrambling for an outlet. Have that backup battery source.
Well, and that and that's another thing too. And make sure you have enough. If it's you, if it's just you, have a couple of chargers. If it's you and you have a family, I like to have I like to have everybody on the same stuff, basically. So everybody in my family has iPhones, okay, and we all have multiple chargers. Right now, we have in this home there's 3 people that live here, and we have 3 iPhones, and we have see 5, 6, 7. We have 8, 9 chargers maybe. So we have a charger for just about every room, and we have 2 car chargers and
Mine's
battery
per room.
backups
Mine's per room.
per room. Right.
Though oftentimes either me or my wife end up sleeping with our oldest child because she's going through that phase,
Hmm.
and thankfully she has a queen size bed. We keep a lightning charger plugged in on that side of the bed like it's our bedroom. That way, go in there, charge the phone up at night. There's no carrying a charger back and forth.
Well, back in the winter when we had the ice storm, is a really good example. We knew we looked outside and we knew we were going to lose power. It wasn't if we're going to lose power. It was just a matter of time and how long it was going to take for them to get the power back on.
Mm-hmm.
I went in there and I said, everybody, get off your phones, get off your iPads, put all your iThings on charge right now. I want all the laptops on charge, all the phones, everything. Put it
Mm-hmm.
on charge, and we put all the iThings on charge. And sure enough, in about an hour, the power went out, and we were without power for about 4 hours. But because we all had our iThings fully charged, nobody was that uncomfortable. We still had communications.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what
Um,
about going to the next harshest scenario will be a grid down scenario.
a grid down scenario. So this is where we get to discuss different kinds of grid down scenario comms. And we're going to kind of cover this at the end, but this is all assuming you have you have a backup power source. Because obviously, unless you're using smoke signals or a Dove courier, you need a power source for how you're communicating. So we're going to touch on that in a bit. We're also going to do a whole separate podcast on backup power, but that's just an assumption for this podcast.
Right.
So basically, your first everyday method, thinking, okay, cell phones aren't working, or in your situation, cell phones aren't the best option, is FRS, which stands for Family Radio Service Walkie-talkies. These are the walkie-talkies you can buy in Walmart, Best Buy, whatever. They usually look kind of like you're going to go camping,
Hmm.
and you don't have to have a license to use them. And what happens is they'll say on the package, this works for 10 miles, this works for 20 miles, works for 30 miles. And Jack and I have discussed this before, and really, I would tell you to just assume, no matter what your situation is, about a mile. And that's really best case scenario because
Right.
that's 30
Exactly.
miles direct line of sight in a
Yep.
desert with good weather conditions.
Exactly. My general recommendation for those is, and this is after having experienced several years carrying a radio as a correctional officer and as a police officer. My general recommendation would be, one, don't skimp on quality.
Uh-huh.
Don't skimp. You
Hmm.
can go to Walmart and you can buy a set for $20, but let me tell you, you're not gonna if they work, you're not gonna want to use them very much.
I'm going to link
Um,
down below, Jack. My set I have is almost 2 years old now,
mhm.
but I'll link down below to a set that I think is good. It was rightly priced. Really, folks, I wouldn't go below $30
Don't
on
go
a.
below $30, and I would.
That's really minimal.
Right,
So
right,
that's
exactly.
what you're
And
looking at.
that being said, whatever they give you as far as a distance on there, as a general rule of thumb, I'd say divide that by 10, and that's probably going to be your actual distance that you're going to get. And as Dave has pointed out, when they're referring to a 30-mile communication distance, they're talking about ideal conditions, direct line of sight, basically conditions where you could also see a flashlight from 20 miles away. You know what I mean? I mean,
Basically.
and they're that's what they're referring to as ideal conditions. But let's face it, when you use these, there's going to be buildings, there's going to be wooded areas, there's going to be, and depending on those areas, it's going to cut your communication down by, I'd say, at least a factor of 10.
Minimal.
So,
And,
so
and it's not enough just to have these toys. And I am guilty as charged of buying toys and not testing them properly. I think we all are in prepping.
right,
But once you buy these walkie-talkies, you want to make sure that everybody inside your group that you'll be communicating with has one, and obviously that you test them. So if you're going to have them at your parents' house, like my family here, I live in Tarpon Springs, Florida. It's a small town, kind of in the north part of Tampa Bay, and all my family lives within, as the bird flies, a mile, but as to get around about 3 miles here. And there's about probably 20 of us here, about 3 miles. But I would need to put a walkie-talkie at everyone's residence, have it fully charged, everyone's residence, and be able to make sure that we could communicate that way. And even just then, that shows you the limits of these things. Even then, and again, we don't have any big buildings where I live beyond 6 stories. We don't have, I'm right here by the water. There's no mountains or anything. But I would bet I would be hard pressed to find a walkie-talkie again, my family lives in a 3 mile radius where we could all communicate off that. But it's worth trying. It's worth having. So if you're going to use this walkie-talkie option, it's a great option. Definitely test it. The main thing I use mine for is I don't use them for house-to-house communication in my family as of now. I have them in the house where if say the grid is down, I have to go somewhere. I can give one to my wife, and I take one with me, and it'll work for as long as it'll work for.
right.
And a great example is I take them on road trips. If the truck dies, cell phones are dead, ham radio in my truck's not working, which is really extreme if all this happens. If I have to go walk to the nearest exit, I give my wife a walkie-talkie, and then I take one too. So that's a good example of those. So our next one would be amateur radio, which is a big hobby of mine. Now, we're talking about radios here. We talked about FRS, we got amateur radio, we're going to also talk about CB radio as well.
Now, you do have to have a license for that.
You do. I'm going to link down below to something I link to pretty much every podcast from ITS Tactical. Without getting too technical, and honest to God, I'm not very good when it comes to spectrums and waves and all that. But the government has divided out the radio spectrum into certain levels, and certain devices like the walkie-talkies or the amateur radio have access to those certain spectrums. There's a great link down below from ITS Tactical that kind of breaks that down for you if you want to know the more technical side. But anyway, amateur radio. That is a radio, and here's my handheld amateur radio, where the government does require you have an FCC license. It's very easy to get. You just take a test at your local radio club, and unless you have issues, you're going to pass it. Well, at least there's 3 licenses. There's technician, which is what I am, which is really all you need, unless you want to go into it as a hobby. There's the general license. That's where you can use the radios and the antennas that talk around the world. Mm-hmm. And you have your advanced. I believe it's called advanced. That's really way up there. But I'm just a technician license because I just use mine for emergency management and just hobby sport around here. And what happens with amateur radio is you'll get issued a call sign, and there's rules about how you communicate on the airwaves. And now you can talk what's called simplex, which is radio to radio. Say Jack was half a mile from me, he had one of these too. We could talk simplex at about half a mile maybe. Mm-hmm. But that's really the same as using an FRS walkie-talkie. What amateur radio does is it uses a repeater system. So I turn into a certain station on my handheld here, or in the rig in my truck, which we'll see a video at the end of the podcast on, and that links me in with a repeater, which is usually on like a radio tower or on top of a tall building, and all the radios on that frequency communicate to that repeater, and hence repeater, it repeats that what's going on to all the radios on that frequency. And usually the people that own the repeaters have, well, I shouldn't say usually, they should have backup power provisions for that, and most of them are for use in emergency. So That's amateur radio. Again, amateur radio could be a whole podcast series, let alone a 3-minute clip in one. So this is the handheld one. They're very cheap. This is, it's called Bofang. It's like China made off Amazon. If you're not going to heavily use folks, even if you're not going to get your license, okay, you don't want to mess with that. I would get off of Amazon one of these. This is the Bofang UV-5R. I will link to it down below. Amateur radio, because you can listen without having to have a license, and technically in an emergency you don't have to have a license. So definitely get at least a handheld one so you can hear what's going on. A lot of preppers use them. And again, I have my main amateur radio rig in my truck, which is much more powerful, can reach much more further away. You'll see that video at the very end. But anyway, amateur radio, definitely something to get involved in. It is often said that when the grid is down, this is all we'll have left to communicate with. And I do volunteer with my emergency operations center here in Pinellas County. I am listed as a ham radio contact. I'm actually assigned to the Tarpon Springs Hurricane Shelter. We have radio kits ready to go at the shelters as we speak, and I'm the radio operator for that one, because that's how the government will communicate with the shelters, is via amateur radio if everything else fails. You have anything else to add over to amateur radio, Joe?
I got nothing to add. It sounds interesting. It sounds like something I might want to get into at some point. I don't, as far as technical, I have nothing to add to it because I don't know enough about it to add anything to it.
But it's good. It's you guys. Even if you're not gonna get into it, get one of these cheap handhelds.
Now, how does that differ from what you also have the weather radio?
The weather radio. What that does, again, we're talking just all different spectrums, and oftentimes a lot of handheld, and this one's kind of low end. It might be able to. I know my higher end Kenwood. Handheld amateur radio can receive the NOAA weather radio stations. Okay. The one in my truck can receive the NOAA weather stations. But a NOAA weather radio, what that does, and this is very important, is it's the way that the government, the national, I forget what atmospheric association or something, the way the government's weather entities communicate the forecast is via a radio. And in the event of a impending disaster or threat, your local NOAA station can issue out what's called a SAME code, SAME. And without getting too technical here, any NOAA weather radio that you have in your home that is capable, most of them are, of alerting you if there's a tornado threat, if there is a thunderstorm warning. You can set it to receive only the alerts for your county or the counties you want to receive for, and that is via a SAME code, SAME. So I'll have also a link down below to the NOAA weather radio that I recommend. I recommend every single household have a NOAA weather radio, especially. Now, most of the threats that I face where I'm out here in Florida are threats that we know are coming 3 days down the road. A hurricane. We can even usually predict a squall line, severe weather coming through in advance.
Here, on the other hand, we have tornadoes to deal with.
Yeah,
that can
where
pop
Jack
up at
lives, and even further, not sure if I guess it would be kind of southwest of you, Tornado Alley. I mean, if I lived in Tornado Alley, I'd have one on my hip like a cell phone, because you literally have a minute to seek shelter. So
or less. Yeah, the last time we had a tornado come through, I was in the bank. And they gave me the option. The bank president came out. He said, "You can either go out and take your chances out there, or you can stay here, and we're going to lock you in the vault." And I'm like, I choose the vault, because I looked out and I could see it starting to touch down on the other side of town. And he actually herded everybody into the bank vault, closed it up, and I mean that's the absolute safest place we could have been at the time. And but yeah, like you said, you'll have 2 or 3 day warning if a hurricane is coming, but a tornado, I mean, literally you have a minute or two, if that, and usually by the time you hear the sirens going off, it's too late.
Yeah, I remember when I went to college in Michigan, I never heard tornado sirens before. Scared the hell out of me.
Oh yeah.
But every home needs to have one. I have one next to my bedside. And again, they're very cheap. I will link down below to one. Now, obviously, this is a radio you only receive on. It's not a transceiver. You're
Right,
not you're
right.
not transmitting on a weather radio.
Oh,
It's just
something
it's.
something I need to add to that too.
Mhm.
If you're in whatever your hometown is, normally they will have when you come into. And I've seen this everywhere I've gone, and you may have to look for it in your area. But in my hometown, when you come in, they have signs posted when you get off the interstate what the emergency AM radio channel is,
Very
and
important.
you can go to that. And I mean all the towers and everything are still up. We're still talking about this being a line of communication, but if you'll tune into that channel, you can just turn your radio, and it's usually some obscure AM radio station, and it will give you any local warnings, any road blockages. If there's storms, if there's a tornado touchdown, you'll get all that emergency information off of that particular channel, and that's all they do. That channel is dedicated just for that.
And that's very very important to have. And but just one thing to remember is to obviously make sure that your weather radio, they all have power to the wall. Make sure it's plugged up, but always make sure I gotta replace mine every seems like every 6 months. Make sure they all take backup batteries like double A's or triple A's.
Keep a good
Make,
supply of
make,
batteries on hand.
yeah, make sure you have them.
That
So when the power goes out. So the power goes out, the weather radio still works. And one thing, too, people don't realize they're used for in an ideal situation. If there is civil unrest, this is getting a bit extreme for this podcast, but if we have a nuclear threat, that is the government's only way to communicate with you.
hmm
So definitely, it's a very, again, links down below, very cheap investment to have.
let's
Um,
let's talk a little bit about going from there and kind of stepping forward a little bit. You touched on it, emergency power for these devices, and keeping some type of power supply on hand. Something I want to touch on, and I've seen this. I've watched some other podcasts, and I have seen this mistake
mhm.
made. Is people will put their batteries and leave their batteries in the device at all times.
No, yeah,
I would definitely
no.
recommend keeping your device sealed in a large, durable Ziploc bag. Keep your batteries separate from the device. That way, it's going to be water resistant, and if you need it, you can put your batteries in it. Because if you leave those batteries in there, one of two things is going to happen. One, it's going to drain your batteries over time.
Mhm.
It just is. It's going to use a little bit of power, but over time, it's going to drain. And two, you could have a situation where you open it up one day and your batteries have burst. I've seen this on
I've had this
flashlights.
happen. I ruined a $50
Exactly.
weather radio having this happen to me.
Exactly. So what do you do now?
Well, now any radio I don't regularly use, whether it's amateur radio, FRS, AM FM radio, I like you just. I mean, you
Keep them
described
separate.
exactly the radio that's in my everyday carry bag is a
Mm-hmm.
small AM FM radio that can receive also NOAA weather radio alerts.
Mm-hmm.
It's in a waterproof bag
Mm-hmm.
with the battery separate.
Exactly.
I've just ruined I've just ruined too many batteries away. Just real quick, Jack, before we go to talk about backup power and then more on AM FM radio. The other two, but not least used, but the other two methods of communication are CB radio.
Mm-hmm.
CB radio is like what truckers use, like breaker, nine, whatever you want to call
Right.
that. That's again a part of the spectrum that does not require a FCC license to use.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had one in my truck. I had a handheld one, but never could really pick up anything where I live. But hey, I know some guys that keep them in their truck and they're good to have. So that's something you might want to explore. Again, it's kind of like a crude version of amateur radio, and they only work really depending on the power of your radio in your truck. You have to be near that person using CB radio, but definitely an option to have if amateur radio is not the way you want to go, but it does have its limits. And then lastly, again, this is not one you would transmit on, but rather you would receive. Is have a police scanner.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have a very expensive one. It's called Home Patrol. I wouldn't recommend everyone going out and buying that. I got that because of my work in amateur radio. Oftentimes these police scanners, they are to program them are just it's the biggest pain in the ass. Home Patrol is more of like a little archaic looking little iPad thing that comes and the memory card goes in and you punch in your zip code and it gives you all those frequencies. Um, if it wouldn't be, I wouldn't say go out and buy that now if you don't have it. Maybe put it on your wish list
Hmm.
and learn more about it. Is maybe look to see if you want to get a police scanner. A word of advice though: learn the laws where you live. I don't. I think it's legal to have in your home wherever you are in the United States, but I know in Florida to have a police scanner in your
They
car if
they
you're not.
frown they frown on that in the state
Yeah,
of Tennessee as well. I'm not sure it's technically against the law, but they frown on it about as much as they do a radar detector.
yeah. You want to have. If you're not news media where I live, you have to have your amateur radio license to have in your car. So I don't carry one in my car unless I'm going like on a long trip,
Hmm.
and I always carry my amateur radio license with me. So just real quick, those were two CB radio and police scanners were two other methods of communication. But yeah, Jack, like you said, basically, kind of transitioning over to backup power. You want to make sure that you don't keep your batteries in your radios, especially ones you don't use normally. If you're using it normally, it's not, you can do that because you're going to drain them
Right,
and
right.
replace them. But on radios that you don't use, I just ruined them before. It's not worth it. And then what I have at home to power small devices, it's called a Goal Zero. It looks like a large battery, and it charges through the wall. You can also buy a solar panel attachment for it.
Hmm.
They're not cheap, but if it's fully charged, I could go a couple of days running my cell phones and my radios off that.
Hmm.
But like I've said before, my immediate backup power, excluding my home generator, is my truck. I have
And
Ford F one fifty.
now you do have a spare battery for your truck as
I
well.
do. I have a
Okay.
Ford F-150, and my truck is my power source, my first line power source. I have power inverters, so I can run up to 750 watts off my car
Oh,
battery,
nice.
off my truck battery, and I have little inverters for inside the car for to charge things that don't get charged to a cigarette lighter.
Right.
As you'll see in the video at the very end, I have an amateur radio hardwired into my truck that's powered off the car battery. And
Hmm.
yes, Jack was correct. I do keep a second battery for my F-150, fully charged in my garage at all times. It's you told it to me last time, Jack. What's it called? I have a thing that keeps the current charged, and I forget what they're called. A
Yeah,
battery.
it eludes me now. If you hadn't asked me, I could have told you. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it's I had. You don't just want to. You don't just buy a car battery and keep it in your garage. They don't work that way. You want to keep it in a safe, cool, dry place,
Hmm.
and have a one. I forget what they're called, but I'll have a link down below to the one that I use, and I'll know the name then. But it keeps the battery fully charged, so I could dump that in my truck if I had to, and I could also, for a more limited amount of time, run my power inverters off that battery. So your car, when you're thinking backup power for anything in prepping, but especially for comms, your car should be your one of your first stops.
Hmm.
And so make sure if if it's time to replace your battery, replace your battery, and then consider having a second one on backup.
And
Uh,
as David also said, you make sure, and this applies to everything, but make sure not only do you go out and buy all these goodies, having all these goodies around and not knowing how to use them properly or testing them out is not really going to help you, because you don't want to find out that this particular item you bought is absolutely useless when you need it the most. So, whatever item it is that you buy, whether it be an inverter for your vehicle, whether it be the little plug-in that goes in your cigarette lighter, whatever it may be. Cables that you bought off Amazon for your iPhone may or may not work. Some of those are questionable. Make sure you test all of these things well in advance of anything happening. On a good day, when the sun is shining and everything is sunshine and rainbows, get these things together, test them, and make sure they work. Test the radios out. What Find out what the distance is, what the reasonable range is on your radios. Have your wife go to the store, see how far it takes before your signal breaks up. Uh, you have to test these things, and you don't want to be testing them when you need them. So,
Absolutely not. Then that goes for anything in prepping, and we'll do a whole separate podcast on backup power. But being that this podcast is centered around things that have to have electronic charge, we would be neglectful not to mention at least how I plan to charge my stuff. And my car is my first stop because it's there
I
and
would say
ready.
car is always your vehicle is always going to be your first. Well, other than if you have a generator for your home, past
Yeah,
that your car is going to be your first stop. I would say further down the line, you're going to be looking at batteries. What I would recommend for your batteries, and I'm not talking about car batteries, I'm talking about your double A's and your D batteries and stuff like that. What I would recommend, keep them in a relatively cool, dry place. Keep them sealed in something that's at least water resistant, if not waterproof. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you look on Amazon, I don't remember the name of it, but they make these little tubes, and basically you can slide your batteries in them and seal it, and it has a rubber gasket, and it's completely waterproof, and I think it'll float. And you don't have to worry about your batteries getting wet. You don't have to worry about anything happening to them. Don't store all your batteries in one place.
Mm-hmm.
Have some batteries in your home. Have some batteries in another room of your home. Have some batteries in your car. Have a few in your garage. But don't have all your, kind of like, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your batteries in one place. Have different, because you don't know. What if your home gets flooded and you can't
Mm-hmm.
get back to your home? Well, there's all your batteries. You
Exactly.
have
And
to
I
have
keep,
some, you know.
as far as batteries go, for the items I need powered, I have enough batteries to make them last almost a month. Now that's taken a long time to build up, but that's kind of. I also got little girls that everything, all their toys
Everything
require
runs off batteries, right?
ungodly amounts of batteries, so I cycle through them pretty easily.
Right.
But I have a good buildup of those. Jack, one thing I forgot to mention with NOAA weather radio, I'm going to bring this up. Even as you and I were talking about storm maps, I forgot to tell you about this one.
Mm-hmm.
This is again kind of rewinding back to the beginning. We're thinking grid up, okay, power up. Your phone's working. The app is called Storm Shield. Look it up in the App Store. I believe it's Android and iOS. Storm Shield. It works as a NOAA weather radio for your phone. In my opinion, it works better than the NOAA weather radios that we talked about that you buy. That doesn't mean you don't buy the other radios, because that radio you plug into the wall is going to work when there's no power. But this basically, you
What did you
download the
say the
app,
name of
punch
that
in your
was again? What?
Storm Shield.
Storm
Storm
Shield.
Shield. I'll
Okay.
link down below. I gotta remember all these links I'm talking about today, Jack. Storm Shield, and basically you download it. You punch in your zip code or your location, and you can even monitor other locations. Like I could say I want to monitor Jack's location, and it will send me NOAA weather radio alerts right to my phone if there's any kind of threat. And when it alerts, it's a very attention gaining sound. When you open the app up, what I love is it starts the radio voice that you would hear on your regular radio in your house if you
Mm-hmm.
have that plugged in. So again, that's called Storm Shield. I recommend everybody that has a smartphone download that app.
It is $2.99 in the App Store,
Oh, that's
but
a steal,
yeah,
guys. This
two
thing used
ninety
to be
nine
like
is cheap
a lot
cheap
more
insurance.
expensive.
That's cheap insurance right there.
Guys, 299, and I am not exaggerating. I am 100%. You can YouTube it. There are stories people that said that app saved my life in Tornado Alley. It
Right.
saved their life. So that should be. I should have mentioned that in the beginning of the
I
podcast.
think I actually think I'm going to download that as soon as we get off here.
Yeah,
But go ahead.
guys, it's I love it, and the best thing is too is that say like I said, it can monitor elsewhere. So
Mm-hmm.
say you have a mother or a father who's elderly that lives maybe 50 miles away, you can punch in their zip code too, and you get their alerts and you call them. And I've actually done that. So
Well, it
I
has
was
a
remiss.
it has a 4.5 star rating, so you can't get a whole lot better
Yeah.
than that.
I think a good way to end this up, Jack, is to discuss, and we've touched on it a little bit, but the importance of having just your good old fashioned AM FM radio in the house. I mean, I know you and I can think back, we're old enough, Jack, we can think back in the boombox days where we had those in our bedrooms and whatever, and God forbid our car before XM radio.
Right.
But a lot of times I know people that don't have a radio. You ask them, "Hey, where's your radio in your house?" I'm not even talking a weather radio. I'm talking an AM
Just a
FM
regular
radio,
radio.
and they don't have one. And in any grid down scenario, that is your only way of receiving information. Now, oftentimes they are plugged in together with a NOAA weather radio. This is a very old, not very old, but old enough radio I keep here in my office. It has various functions. It goes AM, FM, and receives the NOAA weather radio stations, and it can be powered via hand crank. So if I had to use this for a long period of time and I'm out of batteries and can't charge it, you can use this hand crank right here. So if you don't get anything out of this podcast of what to buy, two things. Download that app, Storm Shield. Second, buy yourself one of these radios. You can get them for under $30.
Yep.
And a lot of them, they won't give you the NOAA weather radio alerts, but you can tune into the weather stations on here. And to get that as part of your kit, a go bag I built for my brother-in-law this weekend. That was the first thing that I got for him for that bag. Was a radio. It was an AM/FM radio. A lot of them now have flashlights built in. You can they have a port where you can charge your cell phone through. I
Right.
wonder how
So
long.
there's one that I forget what the brand name of it is, but there's one I was looking at my local Walmart a while back. It's about $50, but it has a flashlight, has an AM/FM radio, cell phone charge, two USB ports, so you can charge your cell phone. So it has a micro USB. It is hand cranked, or it can utilize batteries, or it has a solar panel on the back. So you have so many different ways of powering this device.
Yeah. If you don't buy anything from this podcast, I urge you to buy that. I will, with my many other links, I will link down below to one that I recommend off Amazon. And but yeah, but then so what I have is I have these types, these crank kinds, but I also have regular, small, portable, and you can get them guys for under $10 off of Amazon. I have portable AM/FM radios in all my go bags.
Hmm.
I just keep them in there in my get home bag because we, in our modern society, if everything's on our phones or satellite radio, we just don't think having a normal radio. So I would encourage that, and that's pretty much all I got for comms. I know we kind of shoved a lot at you in this amount of
Short
time
amount of
here.
time, right?
So much we were trying to catch up on stuff here.
Well, the great
We will do, I'm sure, a comms
right.
2.0 podcast where we drill down into some more
As
specifics.
with all of our other podcasts, we will be drilling down into more specific areas. Like you said, this is just a basic overview, and and during these types of videos, we tend to throw a lot of information out there in a very short amount of time. The great thing about YouTube is you can pause anything in this video, or you can pause it if you download the audio only podcast. You can pause it, go to your web browser, do a search for these things. You can do your own research if you want to. That's the great thing about it. And as David said, he's going to have links in the show notes to all of the items he's referring to and to the Amazon links. We don't get any money out of this, so
No,
anything,
it's not even Amazon affiliate.
no,
I don't even do that for
anything
them.
you see on there is either something we recommend because we know it works or something we personally have, and that's why we're recommending it, not because we're getting any kickbacks or anything from it. But I think that'll pretty much wrap it up for today, David. We got a lot of information out there in
We
a short
did.
amount of time. The main thing is have a plan and have communications. Comms are essential, and if you doubt that, take your cell phone and throw it away for a day and let me know how that works out for you.
Exactly.
And I think
Exactly.
that'll pretty much do it. And we
Yes, sir.
appreciate you tuning in for the Realistic Prepper, and we'll see y'all next time.
Bye.
And we
Okay, guys, so this is the radio I keep in my truck. This is a ham or amateur radio. The model is a Yaesu FT7900. It's a dual band transceiver, and I have the speaker mic right here, which you can also control some of the settings in there. And then this is obviously hardwired into my truck. The speaker and kind of the main radio is beneath my driver's seat. I have a small antenna on top of my truck. So let me see if we can get somebody on the radio here. So I'm going to do what's called a radio check, and that's where I'm going to call out my FCC given call sign and ask if somebody on this frequency, which is a very popular frequency here, can confirm that I am hitting the repeater. Because right now, this band I'm talking on, 443.450, that's not some random frequency. That is going to a repeater. So think like a radio tower, and people like myself are able to communicate on this frequency by using that radio tower. So it's a very broad range. If you're just talking what's called simplex, like radio to radio, your frequency, or sorry, your reach depends on your antenna, and it's usually not that far. So let's see if I give you all a good example here. Let's turn this up. Okay, use my speaker mic. KI4TWT, this is David in Tarpon Springs. Can I get a radio check, please? So I hit the repeater because we saw that go up. Now, might not get a response back. It's middle of the day, but wait a few more seconds. Okay, evidently we are forever alone here on this frequency. Nothing heard. KI4TWT clear. So that is the radio that I keep here inside my truck, and I oftentimes will look, like if I'm traveling, like this frequency right here, where I live in Pinellas County, will work almost anywhere. But if I'm going to Disney, over in Orlando, or someplace, or down to Miami, I will look for the frequencies of where I'm going to be driving. So I always have this radio as a backup kind of a communication device. But it also does have a weather radio built in. You don't get alerts, but you can turn to the NOAA weather radio station.
Through the peninsula this afternoon, showers and thunderstorms will be possible for inland counties through.
So there you go. So we can also get the weather reports. All right. Hope you enjoyed it.